Coming up on Network Africa, the World Health Organization laments an increase in COVID-19 deaths as Africa marks 1 year since the pandemic hit the continent. Central African Republic's army recaptures the western border town of Beloko from rebels. Plus, panic grips Kenya's parliament after a lawmaker came into the chambers with a gun. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. February 14 will mark 1 year since the first COVID-19 case was confirmed in Africa, and the World Health Organization is looking back over a year of achievements, challenges and learning as Africa responded to the pandemic. WHO Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Mashidiso Moeti, says the continent is seeing an increase in the number of deaths from coronavirus, and this is tragic. She adds that there are also disturbing warning signs that health workers and health systems in the continent are dangerously overstretched. According to Dr. Moeti, this grim milestone must refocus everyone on stamping out the virus.
In the first year of this pandemic in Africa, more than 3.7 million cases have been reported. And in the coming week, the continent is projected to pass a devastating marker of 100,000 lives sadly lost to this virus. Deaths from COVID-19 have increased by 40% in the last 28 days compared to the previous 28 days. The increasing deaths from COVID-19 are a tragic warning that health workers and health systems in many countries are dangerously overstretched. The 1 year milestone comes as the continent faces the spread of new strains of virus. While a vaccine that protects against all forms of COVID-19 illness is our biggest hope, preventing severe cases and hospitalizations which overwhelm hospitals and health systems is crucial. Go out and get vaccinated when a vaccine becomes available in your country.
Beating COVID-19 and accelerating economic recovery are part of the 4 focus areas of the South African government to steer the nation back to wellness. So said President Cyril Ramaphosa as he presented this year's State of the Nation address. This was a much scaled-down event with only 50 people present in the parliamentary chamber, while many others joined the program via an online platform. President Ramaphosa also addressed the burning question about what will be done about the nation's suspended vaccine rollout plan, but he began by listing the major focus areas of his government going forward.
First, we must defeat the coronavirus pandemic. That is primary in everything that we have to do as a nation. And second, we must accelerate our economic recovery. Third, we must implement economic reforms to create sustainable jobs and drive inclusive growth. Finally, we must fight corruption and strengthen the state that has been weakened. The first phase of our vaccination program, which is targeted at health and other frontline workers, will now use the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which has been shown to be effective against 501Y. We have secured 9 million doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The first batch of some 80,000 doses will arrive in the country next week. Further consignments will arrive over the next 4 weeks, totaling 500,000 Johnson & Johnson vaccines.
Meanwhile, neighboring Zimbabwe is to import 800,000 COVID-19 vaccines from China within the next month. According to the Minister of Information, the first delivery of 200,000 Sinopharm vaccines, that's a donation from China, will arrive next week, while 600,000 vaccines purchased by the government will arrive in early March. Russia had donated some Sputnik V vaccinations, and negotiations are ongoing to get more. Vaccines from India and through the African Union are also expected in the country. Now, Zimbabwe has an estimated population of 13 million and has more than 34,000 recorded cases of coronavirus and over 1,300 deaths. Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamutumbu joins us now for more details on this. Hello, Nigel. What is the government's plan to roll out, these vaccines once they arrive?
The government of Zimbabwe is following the protocols set out by most international and regional governments insofar as the rolling out plan of the COVID-19 vaccine, with the health workers, frontliners, getting the first preference. And you're looking at those in the health services and also other frontline workers. The frontline workers in Zimbabwe are defined in terms of the statutory instruments that have been used to enforce national lockdown, that have been used to enforce the COVID-19 response strategy of government. So after the frontliners, it's going to cascade to the older population and those with underlying conditions as it trickles down. So that is so far what has been revealed. We'll hear more from President Mnangagwa, who is set to address the nation on Monday, as they will be announcing the new lockdown measures as well as the progress with the vaccine.
Wait for, President Mnangagwa's address. We know there's been some skepticism about receiving the vaccine across the continent. What is the situation in Zimbabwe, the reactions from citizens to vaccination?
Yes, there is skepticism. There is actually a big story that the government of Zimbabwe had to release a statement on, carried by one of the mainstream local dailies in Zimbabwe, the Newsday, which in its story angling had said government is actually not sure of which vaccine to buy, something that the government of Zimbabwe has refuted and has come on record. So you can imagine the reaction of people of Zimbabwe is that of uncertainty, is that of a bit of confusion as to whether government of Zimbabwe is going to make the right decision. What is worsening the case is reports coming in from neighboring South Africa that they may not have necessarily made the right decision in the vaccine that they first bought. So there is really controversy, skepticism, and there is really confusion on the part of Zimbabweans insofar as this. But I guess it will get clearer next week when the vaccine actually arrives, and when people, because this is a try and error, would be feedbacking and will, see what happens.
All right then, Nigel Yamutumbu, Zimbabwean journalist, joining us there from Harare. The Central African Republic, CAR, says its army, alongside Russian and Rwandan allies, have recaptured the western border town of Beloko from rebels. Several groups that have controlled most of the country for the last 8 years formed an alliance in December and started a rebellion to try to seize power. Local media reports that this recapture of Beloko opens a key supply route that had been blocked since December and also opens the national road to Cameroon. This will therefore ensure the movement of people and goods in both directions on the Bangui-Baloko axis in complete safety. Meanwhile, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says over 200,000 people have been displaced in the country in less than 2 months since election-related violence erupted in December 2020, and many more have fled to neighboring countries. Well, the United Nations is warning that the threat posed by the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant to international peace and security is on the rise again. Now, that's according to the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, Vladimir Voronkov. He warns that while ISIL has not developed a purposeful strategy to exploit the pandemic, its efforts to regroup and reinvigorate its activities gained further momentum in the second half of 2020. Well, let's get more on this story now. Joining us on the program is security analyst David Otto. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the program. What do you make of this warning by the United Nations that the threat posed by ISIL to international peace and security is on the rise again?
I think this shouldn't come as a surprise, to be honest with you. Remember that in 2019, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurdish-led movement, had declared that the Islamic State, which occupied about 34,000 square miles between Syria and Iraq, had been defeated, in its last stronghold in Baghouz. And, the whole jubilated and thought that was the end. But a lot of us had warned that the physical territory of the Islamic State could have been disseminated, but the group still retained its ideology. It was still exporting foreign fighters to countries from Nigeria to the Philippines to the Middle East, mainland Europe. So this is not something which is new. I think the concern now is with the global COVID-19 pandemic. Many countries are struggling to cope in dealing with the root causes of terrorism because there has been a diversion to deal with the global pandemic. So I think this is where the seemingly rise of Islamic State threat is coming from. But it hasn't really increased per se, but most countries are just diverted their attention to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, just like you've mentioned, there's been a diversion to the pandemic. So how can the world and Africa, how can our continent, be better prepared to, handle this?
I think what needs to be done, we've talked about this previously, that most African countries lack the infrastructure to deal with there's so many foreign fighters that returned from the collapsed Islamic State. And one of the reasons was a lack of database in knowing who left which African country and joined the Islamic State. So they couldn't really have a finger on the people that had returned back to these African countries. So where are we now? I think technology plays a very big role, and having a comprehensive database, but also ensuring that each country has its own national strategy working in line with regional states. And I'm sure that from Nigeria to Central African Republic to the Sahel to countries like Mozambique, this is where I think collaboration comes in. And bringing experiences from countries like Nigeria that have faced the Islamic State for more than 11 years, I think they should play a much more bigger role as the giant of the continent.
All right, then. Thank you so much, security analyst David Otto. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Still ahead on the program. A health tech startup in Nigeria develops an app to help doctors and patients engage remotely. Please stay with us. That's on our Africa Tech segment. Welcome back to the program. Now, there was a bit of a scare on Thursday in Kenya's parliament when a member of parliament said colleagues were unsafe during proceedings because one member was armed with a gun. The MP, Elisha Odiambo, informed the speaker that he had seen what looked like a gun behind the coat of his colleague, Mohammed Ali. The Speaker, Justin Muturi, then asked Mr. Ali to confirm if he was carrying a gun, and apparently Mr. Ali forgot to leave his things outside the chambers. However, Mr. Ali lashed out at his colleague for publicizing the matter and said it was politically motivated, as both support different parties. Now, Kenyan legislators have been divided by ongoing calls for proposed constitutional amendments. Even the president and his deputy are on different sides in the referendum push. Well, let's get more on this story from Kenyan journalist Abby Agina, joining us now from Nairobi. Hello, Abby. What more can you tell us about this story?
Well, thank you for having me. It is a story that has gripped the country's attention for the simple reason that sitting member of parliament was able to access the precincts of parliament and, of course, go into the chamber with a firearm. It is generating a lot of heated debate around the security of members of parliament, as well as a breach of security in terms of ensuring the safety and, of course, proper screening of members of parliament who go into the chambers. So, as we speak at the moment, the member of parliament did apologize to the House. And, of course, his apology was received by the Speaker of Parliament, that is Justin Muturi. The sitting in for the Speaker at that time was a member of Parliament known as Olago Alwoch, who also gave out a stern warning to the legislator.
Now, you said he's apologized and his apology has been received. Does this mean there's no more consequence for this action?
Well, if you ask me, he might just have it easy because of the manner in which he apologized. He told the House that he forgot to surrender the firearm at the entry point where we have the sergeant at arms, where there's a room where they have to store all armed members of parliament are required to deposit their firearms at that station. He apologized, saying in the heat of things, he was rushing into parliament. He forgot to surrender it. Of course, this remains to be quite an interesting development, considering that there are sensors by the door side where anyone going in with a metallic object, it's supposed to issue an alarm, which puts the officers manning their entry points on the spot, because how was it that he was able to pass by the detectors? So it raises a lot of questions, really, over and above his apology being taken in. So far, in actual sense, when someone goes into the House and they're armed, it is the prerogative of the Speaker to quickly marshal the sergeant at arms who are meant to take charge and handle the issue. So it remains to be a very emotive issue for the country.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Abby, again, a Kenyan journalist.
All right, thank you.
Well, a health tech startup in Nigeria, Tremendoc, is seeking to change the way Nigerians receive healthcare by developing an application that will enable doctors and patients engage remotely. The app is a convenient way for patients to access doctors regardless of their geographical locations and from the comfort of their homes.
A typical day in the hospital could entail long waiting hours for medical care and in-person interaction with a doctor, but those days are gradually being phased out with a new reality brought by telemedicine. Patients and doctors can now meet remotely via video and app-based visits, and that's where Ugochukwu Chikezie comes in. The Nigerian with his team has developed a mobile application that can connect patients with licensed doctors. The platform, Tremendoc, was born out of a need to provide a convenient way to receive medical support and bridge the gap between doctors and patients.
I also have a story about my son who was diagnosed with enlarged adenoids, and what that cost was he always had a stuffy nose or blocked nose in the middle of the night, and would force us to drive him to the hospital 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning, or call the family doctor. And then it hit me that there are a lot of Nigerians who didn't have that kind of access. And even if I could drive at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was still keep putting my family at risk.
Available statistics from the World Health Organization show that over 40% of WHO member states report to have less than 10 medical doctors per 10,000 population, and over 26% report to have less than 3. In Nigeria, it is revealed that the physician-to-patient ratio is 4 doctors per 10,000 patients, an alarming low rate, which is why the health tech startup is changing the way patients seek care.
Tremendoc is a telemedicine solution. It's a solution that allows, it's a mobile app that allows patients or users talk to doctors remotely, whether it's via chat, audio, or video calls, 24/7.
Merging healthcare with digital technology was one thing, but convincing the doctors to join the wave was another.
Even doctors themselves didn't understand how it was possible to give a proper diagnosis and treatment to patients remotely. But one question I used to ask when I was talking to doctors to come up on the platform was, I said, have you ever had to, have a conversation with your brother or your sister or your mom or your wife or your friend over the phone because the person is saying, oh, I feel this way, what do you think is wrong with me? And 100% of the doctors have had that experience.
Ugochukwu says although the telemedical platforms are siblings to traditional healthcare systems, they face the same troubles other tech startups struggle with.
I think the biggest challenge is education, actually, because from a doctor's end, there's that educating to be done, and then also the patient's end, from funding to government structures and so many other things. I think it's a general thing amongst different companies.
As the platform seeks to change the narrative of how people access healthcare in Nigeria, it is another way to show how much technology is revolutionizing sectors in the world today.
And that's it on the program for today and for the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Have a great weekend.